Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Strange, and with this one not only do we get closer to the return of Dr. Stephen Strange, but also we get a deeper look into this issue that Mistress Death is having, as well as the reveal of the Harvestman's identity. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch us spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so in our last talk, we had seen the Blasphemy Cartel send their surprise attack on the Sanctum Sanctorum with the addition of the Shadow Knight Revenant. And obviously their intention was to catch Clea off guard and overwhelm her, but little did they know that her mother, Umar, the Unrelenting, had planned dinner that night, which again, for the Blasphemy Cartel, it was just another example of them having the worst timing. Because had they attacked the Sanctum Sanctorum back when Dr. Stephen Strange was around, he likely would have done a protection barrier spell and just wrapped these guys in the Crimson Bands of Sidorak and called it a day. But no, these guys want to come around when Umar's here. So as a result, she butchers them and drinks their blood. I'm like, man, every time it just keeps getting worse for these guys. But also, like we'd seen, just after Clea had taken care of the Shadow Knight Revenant, she's then met by the arrival of the Harvestman, who, like we'd seen recently, he's Mistress Death's Sorcerer Supreme. But with them showing up here and Clea having already taken care of the Shadow Knight Revenant, we'll find that this has caused a bit of an issue between the Harvestman and Mistress Death, with Clea at this point having already done the Harvestman's job. But to be fair, there's no way the Harvestman could have beat Clea to it, because she was the one being attacked by the Revenant, so there's no way he could have gotten there sooner. But while we're on the topic of malicious attacks, I'd like to take the opportunity to tell you guys about this video sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Because now, more than ever before, we use the internet for everything. And there's a countless number of businesses and weirdos who are out there who just want to see what you're doing. But with a VPN service like Surfshark, you can have more privacy, security, and control, instead of just going online unprotected and hoping for the best, leaving your financial information and personal files at the mercy of whoever's watching. So to avoid that, I've been using Surfshark for a while now, and I put it on everything because they allow you to use one subscription on an unlimited number of devices. So if I'm shopping on my phone or my iPad, or if I'm working or gaming on my PC, it gives me peace of mind knowing that I have total privacy and control. And with Surfshark giving me access to over 3,200 servers in over 95 different countries, regardless of where I am, I have the freedom to access the entire internet and watch content that may be only available in select locations. So click the link in the description and use my code DOPE for 83% off and 3 extra months for free, and get the most out of your internet experience with Surfshark VPN. But with the Harvestman arriving here, Clea asks him for more information on these revenants, and in response he lets her know that there's a rebellion in Death's domain. And for the most part, he explains once again how these rogue ghosts are banding together in the hundreds, and in some cases the thousands, and forming a gestalt entity united behind a particular hero or villain, since their own identities had withered away over the ages. But with them lacking their individual identities, they have been able to come together and unite under a more simple concept or single identity that is easier for them to comprehend, which in these cases are heroes and villains, because they're seen more as symbols, which is what makes it easier for these rogue ghosts to come together and create this gestalt identity in place of their own individual identities. And like we'd seen before, this could play out differently whether they unite under a hero or a villain. Because for example, we'd seen this happen on both ends, like on the hero side, when the group of these ghosts came together and reanimated Eric Masterson. Because when this happened, we were shown that they did inherit his power, to where then in addition they amplified it, with there effectively being either hundreds or thousands of ghosts in this one body. Which, by the way, doesn't mean that he's 100 or 1,000 times more powerful, but with what we're shown, in different cases there is a significant increase. But also with the example of Eric Masterson, because he was a hero, his attacks weren't as vicious as they could have been, with these ghosts uniting and modeling after someone who was originally good. And that's why on the flip side, when it came to Shadow Knight, who was already crazy and a cold-blooded killer, that portion was then amplified when his body was reanimated and all of these rogue ghosts came together and united under that identity. So with those ghosts matching who Shadow Knight already was, that combination made his Revenant more dangerous. But it's also here where the Harvestman tells Clea that someone's behind this and they're calling these ghosts from the dead. And with hearing this, Clea then asks what's the connection between these Revenants and the Blasphemy Cartel. But unfortunately, the Harvestman just doesn't have that answer. And he tells Clea directly that he doesn't know, but he'll definitely look into it, because Mistress Death has charged him with ending the Revenant threat. So for that reason, he's gonna do what he needs to do to see that through. And with them saying this, Clea points out that their goals align, since she wants to get rid of the Blasphemy Cartel. So it's for this reason that she offers to help the Harvestman with his duty of chasing down all these revenants in exchange for Dr. Stephen Strange. But immediately the Harvestman shoots this idea down, telling Clea to abandon this goal because Dr. Stephen Strange belongs to death. And he straight up tells her to just forget about him. And Clea tells the Harvestman that she was made to forget him once, and she's not gonna let that happen again. And like we'd seen before, this is another callback to Dr. Strange making a deal with Mephisto to save all of reality, which of course was a deal that came at the cost of Stephen making Clea forget him, which was also referenced during the Death of Dr. Strange event, with Stephen's recent death causing all of Clea's memories to come rushing back, which also in a way is part of the reason why Clea is going so hard for Dr. Stephen Strange, with the memories coming back and being fresh, as well as Stephen's last words at the conclusion of Death of Dr. Strange when he admitted that he was a fool for allowing that to happen, which at the time was a lot like him expressing that he should have found another way, instead of allowing Mephisto to pull them apart. So again, keep in mind for Clea, there's a strong undertone throughout this series that goes beyond her just wanting to get Stephen back, because she's lost him a number of times consecutively, whether because of Mephisto or Mistress Death, and she's come to the point now where she doesn't want any outside forces determining their fate, and she's willing to do anything in her power to make sure that only her and Stephen have a say-so in what happens concerning them. But with Clea telling the Harvestman that she refuses to forget Stephen, he then tells her that the late Dr. Strange isn't worthy of such esteem, to where then he tells her to take his word for it, and he just takes off. But as soon as the Harvestman leaves, Umar then gets ready to depart as well, but before she goes, she tells Clea to think about what she said, as far as Clea using the title of Sorcerer Supreme of Earth in order to take over the world, because with Clea being her daughter, this would be a win for Umar too. And Clea tells her in response, though she may be a warlord by blood, she's not a conqueror. But before Umar leaves, she tells Clea, maybe not, or maybe not yet. And just before she goes, she tells Clea to just give it some thought. But after this, we then jump over to the next night, where we find that Clea has made her way to see Mr. Knight at the Midnight Mission. But with Clea coming here, she's come to get some expert advice from Mr. Knight, with him being someone who's died a lot and came back. So for that reason, she's come here in hopes of getting more information and hopefully finding a loophole that'll help her out. But of course, with her coming here, she lets him know that she recently kind of killed his brother, and in response, Mr. Knight's more or less like, oh, well in that case, I owe you one. But before they get too deep into this talk, he tells her that they gotta have this conversation on the move, because tonight is a work night and Moon Knight has some business to take care of. But through the course of this, Clea, she follows Moon Knight as he makes his rounds, drops by 8 Ball, roughs him up a little bit, which more or less is what he calls a check-in. But he also lets Clea know because he doesn't have magic powers, he has to scare them. And Clea's like, who? Moon Knight's like, everyone. But through the course of this, he explains to Clea how his title works, because when he dies, Khonshu brings him back to life for the purpose of doing his work. So when Moon Knight dies and constantly comes back, it's because Khonshu has more work for him to do. But this also causes Clea to be curious about how is it that Khonshu is allowed to take such liberties with death. And Moon Knight lets her know that it's because Khonshu's a god, and for gods, the currencies of life and death have always been pocket change to them. But through the course of this, Moon Knight is chasing down some of Dr. Thaddeus Payne's men, who's pretty much a guy who has a condition where he has to eat brains to stay alive, and recently his men have been kidnapping a bunch of people. So Moon Knight's beating on one of these guys to get him to talk, and it's here where Clea steps in to help and kind of speed things up. So she then goes full fault teen on this guy, letting him know that Moon Knight's just a man, but her on the other hand, she can show this dude the horrors of the dark dimension. And right away this guy, he then gets to talking. But even with hearing this, I couldn't help but think that, you know, Moon Knight, he can do some scary stuff too, you know? And I'm sure Moon Knight's watching Clea like, nah, I could do that. I mean, I was just warming up to it. But from here, they then make their way to the location, and they take down some more Dr. Thaddeus Payne's men, who he's also infected with his condition, which is kind of messed up. But with getting here, they find the hostages and they set them free. But in the case of Dr. Thaddeus Payne, rather than Clea or Moon Knight killing him, Clea then opts for the merciful / worse than death solution, since that's kind of what these anti-heroes is on today. But what ends up happening is Clea ends up sending Dr. Thaddeus Payne to the dark dimension, where he'll have plenty of company with the mindless ones, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But from here, with the two of them effectively wrapping this up together, Clea thanks Moon Knight for his insight, but before she leaves, he tells her, for what it's worth, when we're talking about coming back from the dead, my experience is this: You need someone with the power and influence to do it, the kind of power and influence a god has. And even then, they're only going to do it so you'll work for them. And he goes on to tell her that Strange would be a good get for a god, or any other power with serious influence and pull. But who would be powerful enough to get a former Sorcerer Supreme to work for them? And it's right there where Clea says that there's only one she can think of. But after this, we then jump over to a graveyard where we follow the Harvestman, and we find him having a conversation with Mistress Death, to where she's more or less asking him for an update and expecting that things went well. But it's here where the Harvestman tells her that he had got there too late and the Sorcerer Supreme had claimed the Revenant. And really it's here where we see, like I'd mentioned before, that this would be a problem, because in response, Mistress Death tells the Harvestman that the Sorcerer Supreme has overstepped her authority and she may require correction. And it's here where the Harvestman removes his mask and says no, and that his wife shouldn't be punished for being who she is by nature. And of course, it's here we find out that the Harvestman has been Dr. Strange, who, just like Clea, he's fighting for love and the hope of reunion. And he goes on to tell Mistress Death that she may have his very soul, but his heart remains with Clea. But yeah, like it's pretty cool getting this reveal, but I kind of feel like all of us already knew this. And in a way, I'll admit that I was hoping that we got at least one more twist before we got Strange. But nope, the Harvestman, that's him. And either he has to work out his deal with Mistress Death, or Clea has to find the other god that's gonna bring him back. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.